It's been a long time since we got a proper 2D Metroid sequel, but Metroid Dread is finally here and it's great. I've been playing this game for the past few days and it's been hard to put down. Even though it took just under 9 hours for me to beat, I enjoyed almost every part of it. I have a few gripes with the game, but we'll get into that later. Just a heads up, I won't spoil any major plot points, and all my gameplay shown is from the early hours of the game because I don't want to spoil any of the later boss fights for you. I think it's better if you just experience those things for yourself. So starting off with the story, if you're like me and have no previous knowledge of the Metroid story, there is a summary of events at the beginning of the game that gives you a quick recap of the world around you. I'll be honest, I didn't quite understand everything, but that's okay because you don't need to understand the story to enjoy the game. All you need to know is that Samus is a badass and your main objective is to get back to your ship so you can get off the planet ZDR. And speaking of Samus, this game does an incredible job at making Samus feel so badass. I know that kind of sounds like a meme when I say it out loud, but seriously, Samus has always looked so cool in her games, and I feel like this game is perfect at portraying her as the badass we all envision in our heads. There are some boss encounters where a giant monster will roar in Samus's face and it doesn't phase her at all. It's just like that one SpongeBob meme, you know what I'm talking about? Additionally, the gameplay is so smooth here. Traversing the planet as Samus feels great and gets even better the further you progress in the game because you unlock new abilities that let you access more areas. And oh man, I love being able to have the slide ability. I think every game needs a slide mechanic, right? You have so many weapons in your arsenal, your main blaster, rockets, bombs, melee. There's so much to play with that I never really got tired of the combat. However, one of the minor negatives I have with the game is a lot of the enemies feel similar. As you get further into the game, I just feel like you face more powerful version of enemies you already faced, rather than more unique enemies. With that being said, I feel like exploration never got old. I got lost a couple of times, but the map is intuitive enough to where you always had some sort of general direction of where to go. I looked at the map a lot, and they did a great job with it because it can feel frustrating if you don't know where to go. Luckily, the map usually has some blinking areas on it that let you know that there's a secret to be discovered. Sometimes it could just be more rockets, or other times it could be where you need to go to progress the main plot. There's also an AI in the game that also lets you know what general area you should be heading towards. Unlocking a new area or new ability always felt rewarding and encouraged me to play just a little longer. Now, something I was not expecting with this game is the difficulty. I'm not well versed with the previous 2D Metroid games, but I have played Hollow Knight, which can be pretty brutal at times. Metroid Dread kicked my ass though. I died a lot. There are plenty of save spots and health and ammo stations around the world to keep you going, but man, this game put some hair on my chest, you know what I mean? I swear, I think I developed arthritis when I finally beat that last boss. But in all seriousness, I was pleased with the difficulty of the game. I never died and felt like it was the game's fault. It was always my fault where I should have dodged or parried an attack. And when a game succeeds with a good balance of difficulty like that, I think you got a recipe for a pretty good game. The parry mechanic was also something that I enjoyed, except for when it came to the Emmys. So the Emmys are these giant robots that hunt you down in certain areas of the world, and you can't kill them until you find a certain weapon to take them down. You have to sneak past them because if they find you, they will grab you and insta-kill you, unless you can parry them. Now, parrying the basic enemies is pretty easy, but parrying the Emmys was so hard because the timing felt so inconsistent. I died so many times to these guys, and it was really annoying because they can detect you so easily and will hunt you down so fast. You can temporarily go invisible to sneak past them, but you move slower while invisible, and if they just bump into you accidentally, while you're invisible, they'll still grab you and insta-kill you. I thought the Emmys were cool at first, but over time, they just came to be an annoyance. I just wanted to explore the world, but whenever you enter an Emmy zone, it's basically no fun allowed because any little thing will set them off and they'll come sprinting towards you at full speed. But when you do get the parry off of an Emmy, it's so satisfying. I played the game in about 70% handheld mode and 30% docked mode, and according to Digital Foundry, the game targets 60 FPS both handheld and docked, while handheld mode is running 720p and docked is at 900p. If you want to look at all the tech specs, I'll go ahead and leave a link to Digital Foundry's video down in the description below. Unfortunately, I don't have the OLED Switch, so I was just playing it on my basic Switch, and it looked great handheld. But when it was blown up on a big screen, it looked a little rough on the edges. Now, I don't think that's the game's fault. I think that's just the Switch's hardware holding it back. But playing it docked meant I had an excuse to use my Pro controller, and you're going to want a good controller for this game because, man, my hands hurt after a long session. The game does a pretty good job of hitting 60 FPS. I would say it dropped a few times during gameplay, but mainly stayed at 60. And that's great for me because I prefer higher frame rate over higher resolution anyways. When you're going from room to room in the game, the loading is pretty seamless. When you have to take an elevator or a teleporter to another zone, you can be expecting to wait about 30 to 40 seconds while loading. Maybe I'm just spoiled by SSDs these days, but that was a bit of an annoyance for me. Not a huge deal, but it's something to make note of. Now, what I did have a problem with was whenever you die during a boss fight, you spawn outside the boss room, which might not sound like a big deal, but when you die a lot like I did, the time it takes to load between each death adds up because you have to enter the room, wait a few seconds for it to load, then a cutscene comes up, and the cutscene plays every time you replay a boss, so you have to then skip the cutscene because you've already seen it, then you can refight the boss. I think it'd be better if the game gave you two options. Would you like to reload before the boss fight, or would you just like to restart the boss fight? Especially at the last boss, I was getting impatient because every time you died, you had to take an elevator, skip a cutscene, then get back to the boss fight. And then there would even be cutscenes during the boss fight that after you see them once, you just want to skip them. But the game replays the same cutscenes every time, and that felt like the game was just laughing at me as I died over and over. That's probably my biggest complaint with the game though, and I guess if you're a pro gamer, then you won't die, and you won't have that issue. Overall, I love Metroid Dread. The genre is called Metroidvania for a reason, because Metroid along with Castlevania has mastered this type of game, and Metroid Dread is no exception. There are so many moments in this game that are cinematic and almost anime-esque in a way where you can't help but crack a smile because it's so damn fun. I think the game is being held back by the outdated Switch hardware, and the enemy encounters could use a rework, but other than that, this game is must play for any Switch owner. Like I said before, I finished the game in just under 9 hours, but I think it was worth the purchase. And if you're someone who likes the 100% Metroidvania type games, then I definitely think you'll get your money's worth here, because there is a hard mode once you finish the game and there's a ton to explore. For all those reasons, I'm giving Metroid Dread an 8 out of 10. But what do you think about the game? Is it your game of the year so far? Let me know in the comments what you think, and I appreciate you all watching. I'll see you all in the next video. Later.